Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. I'm speaking to you from the traditional lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Perth, Western Australia. And I'd like to thank you for joining us for the Sustainable Development Goals Insights and Inspiration session. This webinar is our fifth and final in the series of year-long discussions that OCLC Global Council has been hosting to create awareness and foster dialogue among library leaders on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If you haven't already done so, please do use the chat feature to introduce yourselves, and remember to select everyone from the drop-down menu to ensure that everyone can see your message. Before we go any further, I should introduce myself. I'm Constance Wiebrands, and I'm the University Librarian at Edith Cowan University here in Perth, Western Australia. I also serve as the chair of the OCLC Asia Pacific Regional Council. I'm really happy to be here with all of you today to act as moderator and a panelist for the event and to share in this important discussion on global sustainability and libraries. For those of you who may not know, OCLC Global Council is a 48-member group comprised of library leaders from across the globe, leaders who are elected to serve and represent OCLC member library interests. Together, Global Council delegates work to generate insights that help to inform OCLC strategic directions and advance libraries globally. We advance shared knowledge through thought leadership and collaborative conversations with each other and with members throughout the world. And we promote our shared library values through global cooperation and active participation in the OCLC cooperative. So you can see a few of our faces on the screen. So each year, as part of our work, the Global Council selects an area of focus. For this past year, we selected the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, as we like to say for short. Our activities have been focused on learning more about how libraries are using the SDGs to help promote their communities and inform their strategic directions. There are 17 goals in total, so the Global Council felt that it would be best for us to narrow our focus to the top 5 SDGs where we felt libraries could have the biggest impact. The 5 SDGs OCLC Global Council chose to focus on are SDG 4, Quality Education, SDG 8, Decent Work and Economic Growth, SDG 10, Reduced Inequalities, SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions, and SDG 17, Partnerships for the Goals. So our activities in this area have included this webinar series, and in partnership with OCLC Research, Global Council distributed a global survey on the SDGs. The survey ran from November 2020 to the end of January 2021, and we'll hear a little bit more about those survey results in just a few minutes. But before we begin today, let's take a moment to hear from all of you. We'll be using the live polling platform, Poll Everywhere. So if you've attended the series before, you'll be familiar with this website. The URL will be shown on the screen and sent out via the chat. I think I can see it there. All you need to do to participate is to open an alternate internet browser via your computer or smart device and click on or enter the URL. We're curious to know how many of our attendees today have had the opportunity to participate in one or more of the OCLC Global Council SDG webinars. And I can see that on the screen already. Thank you for your participation. Is this your first time? I can see for quite a few of us, it is the first time. And we have a few who have attended all 5, which is really impressive. It's really wonderful to have all of you here today, and thank you for joining us and for participating. So before I turn things over to our guest speaker, Lynn Silipigni Connaway, She'll be sharing some of the key findings from our Global Council, Global SDG survey. I'd like to take a minute and ask my fellow panelists for today's session to introduce themselves. Let's begin with Earl Givens Jr. Earl?
Thank you, Constance. My name is Earl Givens Jr. I'm the Dean of Learning Resources and Special Assistant to the President for Leadership Development here at Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina, USA. Additionally, I'm also the Vice Chair, Chair-elect for the Americas Regional Council, and I'm also the Vice Chair of Global Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. And now over to Stuart Hunt. Stuart.
Thanks, Constance. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Stuart Hunt. I'm the Director of University Library and Collection Services and University Librarian at the University of Reading in the UK. I'm the immediate past chair of the EMEA Regional Council.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm really glad to have both you and Earl joining us for today's session. Looking forward to hearing from you on the SDGs. And now I'm excited to introduce Lynn Silipigni Connaway. She's our Director of Library Trends and User Research at OCLC, and she's going to share some of the key findings from our Global Council, the Global SDG survey. Over to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Constance. First of all, I want to thank the Global Council delegates and my colleagues at OCLC Research, Chris Sear, Christina Rodriguez, and Helen Blowers, and my colleagues at OCLC Market Research, Peggy Gallagher and Joanne Cantrell, for all of their help and assistance with this project that we'll be discussing today. This past fall, we disseminated an online survey to library staff to identify what they're doing to further the SDGs. And before we get into the key findings, I want to give a few statistics about the dissemination of this survey. It was a big success. We had more than 1,700 respondents in total, so that's very good. 2/3 of the respondents came from the Americas region, a quarter, which is 26%, from Europe, the Middle East and Africa, and just under a tenth, 9%, are from the Asia Pacific region. 16 countries represent the Americas region, with the majority of the responses from the United States and Canada. When we talk about EMEA, it's made of 63 countries, with the largest group of respondents for this survey from Italy and then Germany. Asia Pacific is comprised of 20 countries, with the most responses coming from Taiwan, Australia, and the Philippines. Half of the respondents are from academic or educational libraries, with the greatest number of respondents from the college, university, higher education research institutions, and then the next highest from community colleges, technical colleges, two-year colleges. Then K through 12 library staff, so schools, and then just 1% from other educational institutions. Nearly a third are from public libraries, and 19% are from other library types. And by that I mean national libraries, government libraries, and other special libraries. Now I want to get into some of the key findings from the survey. For the survey, we were interested in the specific activities that library staff are leading to address the 5 SDGs that, based on our previous work with the OCLC Global Council delegates, we believed libraries can most impact. And these 5 SDGs were already identified by Constance, but I will remind you of them. They are quality education, reduced inequality, peace, justice, and strong institutions, decent work and economic growth, and working in partnership to achieve the goals. We also were interested in understanding more about library awareness of the SDGs and their integration into strategic planning for libraries. Some library staff have been heavily involved in many activities since long before the SDGs. We wanted to better understand the connection between the SDGs and the activities that library staff are performing. So respondents were asked the question, out of the following 5 SDG goals identified by your elected OCLC Global Council delegates, please rank where you think libraries could have the greatest impact. And again, you can see these figures, and Constance already addressed these. Quality education, or SDG4, was ranked highest by far, averaging an average ranking score of 4.52 out of 5. Next, reduced inequalities, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and then decent work and economic growth were a little less than that, with partnerships for the goals having the lowest average rank of all of the 5. Now, the comments underscored the role of the library in education. And here we have a quote from a Canadian public librarian who said, "The public library is the cornerstone of equal access to education and learning in any community. We work with our communities to offer free and relevant programming and collections that meet our community needs." One thing that I really like about this quote is that it addresses education in terms of understanding the community needs and working to meet these needs. However, we have to remember these needs will differ for each type and each library based on the community. Libraries have also worked very hard to serve populations who might be underserved by other public institutions. For example, one Greek library staff mentioned having a mobile library at refugee camps. This is another great example of meeting users where they live, work, and play based on their specific and particular needs. These are the rankings of the survey respondents to the question, out of the following SDGs, SDG goals identified by your elected OCLC delegates, please rank them. Now we're going to hear from our panelists. So what, if anything, surprises you about this ranking? Let's start with Earl. Earl?
Thank you. I would say quality education, SDG number 4, is not really a surprise. You know, libraries, we do this naturally. This is part of what we do. We provide access and learning. We're rooted in that, you know. So my earliest memories in libraries was going with my dad to look at auto mechanic books because it was the only place in town you could, so we could fix our car and keep it running, you know. So access and learning. But what a real surprise to me was, to be honest with you, was SDG 16 and SDG 17. And the reason why is the peace, justice, and strong institutions. One of the targets for that is to ensure public access to information and protect fundamental freedoms. And I feel like we naturally do that in libraries, and that's one of our goals, is breaking down barriers and eliminating gatekeepers, so to speak. And then SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. Um, you know, when you look heavily into that SDG, it talks about providing uh, cooperation for access to science and technology, and we do that as well. I mean, you see libraries doing that with STEAM and STEM and maker spaces and digital labs and all kinds of different things, providing and partnering to do that. You know, there are no unlimited budgets, but partnering to bring those services. And so I was surprised that those weren't ranked as high, but quality education for sure, I knew would be at the top.
Thank you, Earl. Let's hear from Stuart next. Stuart?
Thank you. I mean, I guess one of my initial surprises was actually slightly in awe is how everyone could narrow it down to identifying those top five. And I think that kind of picks up on Earl's point as well, slightly around, how do we actually narrow this down to some of the key SDGs? And I think perhaps it reflects the diversity and the geographic spread of all the libraries responding, that we did actually identify those top five in a fairly resounding way. Like Earl, I'm not surprised at SDG 4, education, being there at the top. And I think we understand education as an in itself, and also I think as a tool for achieving the other goals. So perhaps that's also slightly underpinning why some of them aren't appearing so high up, is because we believe that education is a means to achieving, for example, climate change. I think the other surprise for me at a more personal level was the geographic variation in responses to the survey itself. In my own country, the UK, it's somewhat surprising that the response rate was lower than we have seen in previous Global Council surveys. And it does slightly raise a question in my mind around what kind of level of awareness do we have with respect to the SDGs within libraries and within my sector, which is universities, higher education. And is it lack of awareness, or is it lack of engagement? And what do we really need to do to turn that around? I think there's a real issue that all of the SDGs identify is around social responsibility at this broadest level, and how we as librarians and libraries and library leaders enable social responsibility. But also I think the big concerns around environmental responsibility as well, and the interrelation of those two things. And I can certainly clear that across the 17 SDGs, they really do cut across as bigger themes, if you like. But I think I would certainly say that I'm certainly on the same page as Earl in his comments too.
Thank you, Stuart. And now Constance?
Thank you, Lynn and Stuart and Earl. I don't want to repeat anything that's been said. I agree with what's been said. I guess I just add that I'm happy to see that reducing inequality, social inequality, is a, we feel that that's an important SDG to be conscious of and thinking about when we do our planning, for example, because when I was reflecting on that, I think sometimes for library leaders, we can get a bit caught up in the minutiae of our roles or in wider organizational politics, and to have a bigger picture and a bigger purpose, I think is very important to remember that, that's what's our goal or our mission as a library. Whether it's very, very focused on quality education, if we're in the education sector, or providing access. Love to see that slide about access for refugees, for example. I think that's an important thing about the SDGs, and pleasantly surprised to see that reduced inequalities rates highly. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you. Now, another question that the respondents were asked in the survey was, to what degree, if any, has your library incorporated the SDGs into your strategic planning? And as you can see from the chart, fewer than a tenth, so 6% of total respondents, have explicitly referenced the SDGs in their strategic plans. However, 30% of the respondents have considered SDGs as part of their strategic planning efforts, even though they do not explicitly reference them. So that's good to hear. 41% have not incorporated the SDGs, and 23% are not sure if their library has incorporated the SDGs into their strategic planning. Now, respondents were also asked what other goals they believe to be most relevant to strategic planning. And you can see that the total number of responses was almost 1,000. And then you see the breakdown by the regions. So the Americas, the Asia Pacific, and the Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And And so on the last three graphs, you see the breakdown by type of library. And so good health and well-being came up, sustainable cities and communities, and also gender equality. So those were the three top ranking other SDGs that were being considered for strategic planning. And now I am going to ask our panelists what other goal they believe is most relevant to strategic planning and why. And this time, let's start with Stuart.
Okay, thank you for that. I think, interestingly, the one I would choose is SDG 5, which is gender equality, which appeared in that the graphs we just saw. And I think I would consider gender equality issue from two perspectives. One is around, I think, gender equity, and also around gender identity. And I think they're areas where libraries have a really important role to play. I think in terms of gender equity, it's clear that there is still discrimination within our libraries, within our wider institutions, and certainly within society. And it questions me in terms of strategic thinking, how do we want to address that? And what do we do to ensure that there is gender equity? For example, if I take my institution, I look at my senior team, the demographic is largely female rather than male, but that does reflect the wider library cultural sector, I think, where I'm working. So it's perhaps not an accurate representation of wider society. And also the things that we do in terms of our recruitment and selection processes, how we ensure that we are appropriately selecting candidates that reflect diverse gender, how are we achieving that, and also how are we actually designing our physical spaces, our buildings, to ensure, for example, that women are safe within those spaces. So I think there's quite a lot in terms of equity. And then I think in terms of gender identity, there's a lot in terms particularly how we support our trans community, recognizing that trans rights are human rights. What do we do as a library where we deal with sensitively with the issues of gender identity? And there are good examples of that at the micro level within our authority files, within how we change the identity of an author on research outputs, but also things as I operate in a university with our student record systems, which obviously then populate our library systems. And how do we sensitively and appropriately record gender identity in those systems that actually meet the requirements of patrons that are using our libraries? So I think there's actually quite a lot in how we think about supporting gender diversity within our institution. So it's really pleasing to see gender equality there in that slide.
Thank you, Stuart. The issue with gender is also very important, even when developing surveys. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that. And so next, let's hear from Constance.
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, my answer to this was very exactly as you might expect from a university librarian. I still feel that quality education, SDG 4, is the one that's most relevant to me as a university librarian. And I also think that reduced inequality is also highly relevant. I think many of our universities and in most of the towns and cities where our libraries are serving the community, we are usually committed to reducing inequality in our community. So from that point of view, I would argue that aligning our planning to these goals would help to make our services highly relevant to our communities as well. So for me, those two are the big ones. I love Stuart's answer though, and agree about how do we make our universities, in this instance, more inclusive. That's something that we could really spend a bit more time on and a bit more thought on what we could be doing and how we can hear the voices of the smaller communities within the larger organization. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Lynn.
All right. Thank you, Constance. Earl, do you want to answer the question for us?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues, and except I have a little different approach to it. I believe everything that they've said could exist inside of, and remember, I'm a leadership guy, so I'm kind of radical. So I believe it could all exist inside of SDG 11, which was on part of the results. And when you look heavily into SDG 11, when you're talking about sustainable communities and things of that nature, so make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And I believe that personally, that if we focus on people, then and growing people and their self-awareness of a lot of the issues that are social issues that are going on in our society, um, and planning in our libraries to do so, then I believe that we will begin to kind of cross-pollinate and move into some of the other SDGs where it comes to gender equality, where it comes to quality education, and I believe that that's doable. So from a leadership perspective, I think while the physical structures and everything like that is important, it would not be possible if people basically weren't grown to that place from the grassroots level in self-awareness and understanding inclusivity and understanding how to make society safe, resilient, and truly sustainable. So in a library, one of the things you can do is start looking at the building library collections in a more inclusive way, create diverse collections. Um, and when you're building those collections, don't look at it in the way we traditionally built them. So they need to be racially conscious and culturally competent practices, where you're looking at uh, disability and ability, ethnicity, race, nationality, empowerment, gender, sex, sexuality, health, and um, and then libraries can reach out and partner, right? We can build developmental programs, and this is all under SDG 11, right? Build developmental programs that increase self-awareness in people. We're teaching them how to diagnose systems and start looking at the systems that we have in our society, and especially our local society, where we can start making change. Teach people how to connect to people, how to discover yourself, where are your strengths, your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, and how to engage others. And in doing so, you can establish a just cause in your community that everybody will get behind regardless of where they come from, because it's so inspiring that people are compelled to connect and sacrifice to it, and thereby build a sustainable society.
Thank you so much, Earl. Well, in addition to meeting users where they live, work, and play, library staff also meet their community based on the particular needs. And these are several quotes that I really liked from the comments in the survey. One Puerto Rican academic librarian told us that their institution has staff such as counselors, nurses who work in collaboration with other agencies of the public and private community, and they use the library facilities to carry them out. We learned this as well with libraries in the US dealing with the opioid epidemic that has been happening here. Another academic librarian, and this person is in the US, echoed the sentiment saying that their library is a jack of all trades. If we can find a way to help, we will. Finally, I want to end with a few other quotes from the open-ended section that I think do a really great job of demonstrating the role of the library in the broader community ecosystem. The first one comes from an Italian public librarian who said, "We have library points all around the town, also in shops, malls, and other public spaces where people can meet the library without actually having to visit it." I love this idea of people meeting the library where they are rather than having it as a single building that they have to make a special trip to go to. It demonstrates the theme that the library is all around us. And it also demonstrates a theme that we have done a lot of research on at OCLC, the library in the life of the user. Now, library staff also have been working to better serve diverse communities. And we heard this from our panelists today. And one U.S. public librarian told us, we have formed an equity, diversity, and inclusion task force that is taking a close look at our collections, buildings, programs, services, policies, and hiring practices through an EDI lens and making changes where necessary to ensure our materials, programs, and services are representative and equitable. And one thing that stands out to me about this quote is the idea of making changes where necessary and seeing the library as a constantly evolving and improving institution based on the environment or ecosystem. I now will ask our panelists what thoughts they would like to share about how library staff can use the SDG survey results to inform and develop their strategic plans. Let's start with Constance this time.
Thanks, Lynn. From my perspective, I think keeping the relevant SDGs in mind, it's a useful exercise because it should serve to remind our library staff that our libraries are part of a larger society and that we have an important role to play in helping to improve society as a whole. For library leaders, I think it's really important to always remember that bigger picture when doing this planning. And I think the SDGs are really important pointers to helping us, to pointing at all the work that remains to be done to make the world a better place. We've been having a bit of a conversation about how we try not to be too insular and too inwardly focused all the time when we're planning. You know, what not only planning for the future, but planning broader, not just always thinking about our tiny patch, but looking for partnerships across the university and outside, and just trying to think bigger picture. So I really like the SDGs for that as a prompt for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Constance. And now let's hear from Earl.
I value the survey results, and I think that library staff can use that as a guideline, if you will, to really create your own survey instrument to measure your community and see where they are with on those SDGs. I wouldn't even put the SDGs in the survey the way that we've done it, because there might not be an awareness like that, but it should be the underlying kind of guiding principles of the survey. That helps you understand where your community is at and how to service them by using the SDGs. And that kind of a survey should give you your values, what your people value, their loyalties, what kind of processes that they're loyal to. And it should also give you information about their losses, what they're afraid of, what they feel like, this is why I can't commit to this because of. And then that helps you know where your community is. And the SDGs, they're very powerful. You can use them to speak to all three of those areas: the values, loyalties, and losses. Meet your community where they're at and begin to live those SDGs out. Thank you.
Thanks, Earl. And finally, Stuart, would you like to answer the question, please?
Thanks, Lynn. I think one of the things that's kind of clear in thinking about this issue is there's sort of a view that, in the context I'm coming from, universities and university libraries address social and environmental responsibilities when we address the issues outside of ourselves and outside of our own organizations. so that when we address social issues through the programs and the activities, our collections, the services we provide, and how we directly address social responsibility in that way. And that's all true. And I think there's also the aspect was we need to address those things internally with ourselves and with our own organizations, understanding that kind of microcosm, macrocosm continuum, if you like. So the questions we're asking of society, we need to ask of ourselves and how we're doing things. One of the things I'd like to flag up to colleagues is the Times Higher Education Impact Awards, which are only recently published in about the last 10 days, which shows internationally how libraries are actually achieving the SDGs. Universities across the world can participate in this survey. They choose to do so. You don't get immediately put into it. My institution was in it for the first time this year. And it's very eye-opening to see which universities are considered internationally to be delivering the most against the specific SDG. So that's a helpful planning tool, if you like. And I think you can use that to link library strategy to institutional strategy, because the two are so wedded. In my institution, we have 4 strategic themes, which are community, excellence, sustainability, and engagement. And I think those all have a direct resonance with the SDGs. And indeed, right now, we're going through an initiative called Planet Partners, which is an ongoing program of 17 days to coincide with the 17 SDGs. And today, indeed, is the day of gender equality. So it kind of resonates with what I'm doing. So what the university is actually trying to do is to tie the community, to tie our research, to tie our teaching, to tie our external engagement directly into the SDGs. And I think we can do that at the library level as well. But the key thing we need to do is think about how we support our staff in doing that. And as Con was saying, I think there's a really interesting point where the SDGs can be a leaping off point for our strategic discussions and conversations. Where are we going to go with these issues? And they really help to be quite a fruitful mine, or a template, if you like, against which our conversations can happen. So I think it's a wonderful tool set that I think will continue beyond Global Council's work on it this year.
Well, I want to thank our panelists, Stuart, Constance, and Earl, for their discussion points and thoughts, because I can see from the chat that there are a lot of people who are now thinking of different things and providing other examples. So thanks so much. As I already told you, we also had an open-ended section of the survey where respondents can put in their own comments. And on this slide, I want to highlight several different comments which demonstrate one of the major themes that we discovered from the survey, and that what I see written in the chat and what I heard from our 3 panelists today, and that's whether explicitly or implicitly, libraries provide extensive support for the SDGs. And the first quote that we have is from a US academic librarian who said that libraries model sustainability. We are inclusive, shared infrastructure that reduce need for individual broader consumption. There are a few things that I think are interesting about this quote. First, there is the idea of shared infrastructure, which can greatly increase efficiency. This also is interesting because the shared infrastructure can be on several levels. First, individual libraries can provide a shared infrastructure for communities that they serve. A book that the library purchases once, for example, can save several people from needing to purchase it to read it. At a broader level, though, you could also look at shared infrastructure among libraries through cooperative agreements like consortia. So libraries are greatly increasing their efficiency of the system as a whole. The second quote talks about this broader infrastructure in some more detail. It comes from an Australian academic librarian who said libraries can play a role in providing the infrastructure to facilitate innovation. For example, research data stores, institutional repositories, archives, etc. The other part of the first quote that I think is interesting is the inclusivity. This is something that came up in a lot of the survey. For example, a French academic librarian said, Libraries are places of tolerance, openness, and diversity. They have all the assets to go forward in this direction and to be an active actor of change. And finally, a U.S. public librarian also talked about this openness, saying that the library is in a unique position to coordinate services and build networks across the community through information distribution, community partnerships, and community leadership. In both of these quotes, we can see the theme of the reach that the library has to a large portion of the community, one that is virtually unparalleled among both public and private institutions. So overall, libraries support SDGs through services and partnerships that they form. And I want to end by highlighting a quote that addresses why libraries are such good partners for the SDGs. A U.S. public librarian told us, the library serves as an amplifier and connector in the community it serves. In my opinion, it is impossible to underestimate these connections. And several of the projects that we have done at OCLC Research in the past few years, we have seen the reach that library staff has to members of their community. An example that I already mentioned is our project on public libraries responding to the opioid crisis, which highlighted the fact that library staff had relationships with other community agencies and with people who tend to avoid other public agencies. And they were uniquely qualified to help connect these individuals with other services. I want to thank you for joining us today, and now I will turn it over to Constance.
Thank you, Lynn, for that great overview. I think the results from the survey really show how libraries can use the SDGs to improve their communities and the world, and that we all have similar goals. And I can see from the chat that it sparked a lot of thinking, so thank you. Before we close today, we want to ask our audience their thoughts about what other possible SDGs you think libraries could have an impact on. The conversation so far has focused a lot on those 5 SDGs where Global Council felt libraries could have the greatest impact. But we're curious, if you added an additional SDG for your own library, what would it be? So we're going to use Poll Everywhere once again, and the URL will come up on the screen shortly and sent in the chat. So again, to participate, please just open an alternate internet browser via your computer or smart device and click on the URL or enter the URL to choose. So there are 17 goals in total, and I'll give you a bit of time to look at the list and pick one. You can see there, I think we're inspired by Earl and thinking about sustainable cities and communities. SDG 11. Good health and well-being is also doing really well there, and climate action. But wow, Earl, look, sustainable cities and communities at 38%. Yeah, interesting. Good health and well-being. Well, you know, we have been living through a pandemic. I don't think that's a surprising one. Okay. So thank you all for participating in the polls today. I think this will give us a bit of food for thought, that the point that Earl made about sustainable cities and communities. So thank you everyone for your participation in the polls today. So it's been a really wonderful conversation, and I hope you've gained gained some valuable insights. Thank you to my fellow panelists, Stuart Hunt and Earl Givens Jr., and to our wonderful guest speaker, Lynn Silipigni Connaway, and to all our attendees for joining us and participating so well in today's event. Before I let you all go today, I have a few announcements that I'd like to share. So firstly, happy to report to everyone that the findings from this global SDG survey will shortly be published in a report, and made available to membership in June this year. So you can visit that URL on the screen there to learn more about OCLC Global Council activities on the SDGs over the past year, and get access to previous webinar recordings if you'd like to listen to them. I'm also happy to share that OCLC Global Council has selected a new area of focus for the coming year. This is libraries and open ecosystems, local engagement, global impact. So the Global Council will once again partner with OCLC Research to dive deeper into the roles that information literacy and sustainability play in supporting open ecosystems such as open access and content, open educational resources, open scholarship, open learning, and open and inclusive communities. I think this is a very exciting topic. And last but not least, OCLC Global Council is currently seeking library leaders to serve as regional council delegates who will represent OCLC member library interests and help inform future OCLC directions. I'd like to encourage anyone who's interested in running for a delegate position to visit that website on the screen there, OCLC 2021 elections, to learn more and complete a self-nomination form by the end of this month, May the 31st. I can speak from a personal perspective that being on the Global Council is both an educational as well as a personally gratifying experience. You learn a lot from being on this wonderful council. So thank you everyone again for attending today's session and for your participation. And I'd like to wish you all a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And for me, a good night. It's almost midnight here in Western Australia. Thank you, everyone.